Okay, so first of all, let me introduce myself. I am Dr. Hannah McCormack, and I am the campaign manager for Tackle Your Feelings. Tackle Your Feelings is a positive mental wellbeing campaign, and we try to encourage absolutely everybody to be proactive when it comes to their mental health and wellbeing. And I'll go through why that is so important in a moment. So what I want to do first of all is just get you guys who are on the call right now, and even people who are watching this back, to just think about the answer to this question. When I ask the question of you, what is mental health? What comes to mind when you hear the phrase or you hear the words mental health? And I want you to hold on to the answer just for the next couple of minutes while I go through some of the in-house kind of do's and don'ts of this session. So first of all, obviously, huge thank you to the innovation hubs at GMIT for introducing or having me come in virtually and deliver these lunchtime sessions. I will try and keep them as short as possible. I know lunchtime is very precious for a lot of people, so this is just kind of some nice, easy, hopefully easily digestible information that I can give you around mental health and around mental well-being. So as I was saying, the Tackle Your Feelings campaign is a positive mental well-being campaign. We are run by Rugby Players Ireland. That's who I work for. And the reason why Tackle Your Feelings came about is because Rugby Players Ireland actually recognised that rugby players themselves were more inclined to look about or think about their well-being, their own kind of health, their own kind of state of mind off the pitch when they were told that would have a positive impact on the pitch. So if you kind of take a step back from that, what we are saying is if you look at your own mental well-being, if you look at your own mental health, it's actually going to have a positive impact on your own performance. And while it's not necessarily a pitch that you're performing in, it is your job, it is your career, and it is obviously your business. So a lot of the time, what happens off the pitch is going to impact how we perform on the pitch, or what happens outside of our jobs is going to impact what is happening inside of our jobs, or our ability to do the job to our best ability. And obviously things that are happening in our jobs or in our careers, or in the rugby players' case, on the pitch is going to have an impact on your well-being off the pitch. So they're very closely related. Rugby Players Ireland is the representative body for all elite and professional rugby players around the country. We look after all the players that are based in Connacht, Ulster, Leinster, Munster, the women's 15s and the men and women's 7s. And we are sponsored by Zurich Insurance. They are one of our main sponsors, one of our long-standing sponsors, who work with us to help create or help make Ireland the best country in the world in which to play rugby. And because of that relationship, and because of what I said earlier about us recognising in Rugby Players Ireland the influence of well-being on performance and the influence of performance on well-being, that relationship continues on through the Tackle Your Feelings campaign, and Zurich Ireland and the Z Zurich Foundation actually fully sponsor the Tackle Your Feelings campaign and these Tackle Your Feelings workshops. So today, in this first session, I'm going to talk to you about what mental health and well-being is, and then I'm going to quickly go over what stress and worry is. Now, there may not necessarily be a huge amount of time at the end for questions and answers, but I would say if you want to, at any stage, you're more than welcome to put a question into the Q&A section of the webinar. That way, it will remain completely anonymous. I will be the only one who can see it. And if I get a chance, I can answer that for you. If I don't get a chance to answer it during the session, what I can do is make sure that I can submit the answers, or what I'll do is I'll type up the answers so that everyone can get access to the answers of the questions that were asked. Again, I will keep all information anonymous, so you don't have to worry about anyone being able to identify you if you do want to ask that question. And then obviously the alternative is that you put something into the chat function, but that will probably be available for everyone to see. So feel free to leave a comment, feel free to ask a question at any stage. You don't have to wait to the end. So I'm going to come back to that question of what is mental health. And the reason I ask you that question at the start of this webinar is because there are a lot of negative connotations when it comes to mental health. Traditionally, historically, even in pop culture, when we hear mental health, it's usually assigned to negative characteristics or even negative characters in the fictional world. If you watch any kind of crime dramas or any crime documentaries, mental health or mental illness is often given as a reason or as a justification for someone's actions. So often it's something that we feel that it doesn't belong to us or isn't necessarily for us to worry about. But the truth of the matter is that your mental health is actually your feelings, thoughts, your emotions, and mood. And that is something that everybody has. Everyone has feelings, everyone has thoughts, everyone has emotions, and obviously everybody has mood. And the thing is that we are going to experience changes in all of these things. Our mental health is not going to remain consistent. If our mental health remained completely consistent all the way throughout our lives, we would be missing out on a lot of human experience. We would miss out on some of the extreme positive emotions. We would miss out on some of the negative emotions. We wouldn't necessarily have lots of functioning thoughts. The feelings that we experience, whether it's love, whether it's joy, whether it's happiness, whether it's anger or sadness or upset, these things wouldn't happen. So that is what encompasses your mental health. I hope you can understand and you can appreciate that, like I said, our feelings, our thoughts, and our emotions are going to, and our mood are going to change. And those changes can be experienced on a daily basis. They can be experienced on a weekly basis, definitely experienced on a monthly basis. And I think we can all appreciate and we can all relate to the fact that our mental health has changed in the last 12 months. And not only in the last 12 months, but more than likely in the last 20 to 24 months before the big C word that is COVID happened. These changes, these differences are very normal. And like I said, they are very much part of the human experience. If we didn't have them, then we wouldn't necessarily be living life to the fullest. The other thing to be very appreciative of and to be very aware of is that our mental health is often influenced by the situation that we are in. But the thing is that even if we are in the same situation as someone sitting beside us, whether it's someone in our family, whether it's a work colleague or someone that you share an office space with, that even if we are sharing a situation, our mental health isn't necessarily going to react in the same way as everyone else's. And again, COVID has given us a really big snapshot into mental health and how mental health differences can occur between people. Over the last 20 months or so, we have had a lot of things that have been outside of our control. We've had to do a lot of things that we don't necessarily want to do. And some people have been able to thrive. They are not necessarily the rule. They are very much the exception to the rule. But some people have relished the fact that they have been given this extra time or this extra space or this opportunity to take a step back and relax. But that is not what has happened to a lot of people. A lot of people have found the last 20 months at points quite difficult. Our feelings have changed throughout those 20 months. The thoughts that we have had have gone up and down. I'm sure we've all experienced a vast range of emotions and a vast number of moods in comparison to the same 20 months before. So what I want to point out is not only mental health something that we all have, the differences in our own mental health from year to year, month to month, day to day, week to week is very normal. And also the differences that between our mental health and someone else's mental health is also normal. They aren't supposed to be exactly the same. So that's what I mean when I talk about mental health. And I hope you can appreciate that it is absolutely something that we can all relate to. Something else that we can all relate to is well-being. And well-being is incredibly important in terms of our mental health. If you actually look up the definition of well-being or you look up the definition of mental health, they will interchangeably have one the other in their definition. But when we talk about mental well-being, what we consider well-being and tackle your feelings is the balance point or the equilibrium between the challenges that you face as an individual and the resources that you have to deal with those challenges. So this diagram will help me illustrate that for you. So challenges will have a negative impact on your perceived mental well-being. Challenges, which I have a non-finite list, obviously, but challenges such as COVID, one of the biggest challenges we've ever had to face and hopefully ever will have to face in our lifetimes. Work stress is obviously a big challenge for a lot of people. working from home versus working in the office, being able to talk to clients face to face versus having to do it virtually, money problems. Again, this is a big challenge, and I know that you guys are all potentially involved in startup companies, so I don't even have to talk to you about how money problems can be a challenge. Another thing that COVID brought about was a lack of connectivity between people, and then the resultant feelings in isolation have had a huge negative impact on our mental well-being. So when we experience a challenge, it's going to take a lot of energy and it's going to take a lot of effort to deal with. And because of that expenditure of energy and effort, it's going to have a negative impact on our mental well-being. And often that manifests itself as just feeling a little bit more tired than normal. If we look over to the right-hand side of the diagram, you'll see that resources is written in a big up arrow. And that's because when we have resources in place, or when we have resources in our back pocket, what they're going to do is they're going to rebalance us or help us deal with those challenges. So they're going to have a positive impact on our perceived well-being. So when you're facing a challenge, you turn to your resources, and that brings you back to that balanced level. So resources can be resilience, it can be support networks, your own personal values, the way you communicate, your self-care and your self-compassion. These are all considered resources. The thing with resources, and the great thing about resources, is that even if you're not experiencing a challenge, they still remain incredibly beneficial. Because what they're going to do is they're going to continue to boost or to push up your perceptions of positive mental well-being. They are going to enable you to live your best life, and they are going to enable you to be the best version of yourself. And in Tackle Your Feelings, that is something that we want to do. We want to make you more aware of your resources and make you more aware of the benefit that they have. And we also want to make you aware that absolutely everybody can benefit from looking after their mental health. So I know that is not necessarily the clearest image because I have a dark background behind it, but you can see this is a little brain with lifting a weight above its head. And we refer to Tackle Your Feelings as the strength and conditioning coaches of your mental health. It isn't just that you should only be focusing on your mental health or looking to deal with the challenges that you face, looking towards your mental health and well-being when you're experiencing a lot of challenges. Of course, it's incredibly beneficial to try and rebalance yourself or bring yourself back up to that equilibrium by drawing on your resources. But actually, it's really beneficial to front load yourself with these positive resources, to work on these positive resources when things are going well, to make you stronger, to make you more resilient, to make you more immune to the challenges. By having all of these resources in place, you're not going to eliminate the challenges. A lot of those challenges are outside of our control. A lot of those challenges happen to us without we never really want to have them. I can guarantee that nobody puts their hand up in the morning and says, do you know what, I would really like to have some money worries this morning, or to face some challenges in terms of that. Or I'd really like to have a rocky relationship today. I think that might be a nice way to start my week. Rather, these are the things that when we have more resources in place, and like I said, they can be things like social support, they can be resilience, they can be self-confidence and optimism, then we are better able to deal with the challenges that face us. And even if you aren't experiencing those challenges, like I said, if things are going well for you, if life seems to be pretty good, then working on your resources, being proactive with your mental health and well-being is going to make you the best version of yourself. It's going to help you gain those 1% increases. It's going to help you improve. And when we improve, we get to be the best version of ourselves. And when we get to be the best version of ourselves, we generally get to live the best version of our own lives. So that's a really quick insight into mental health and well-being. So what happens when we don't necessarily have resources, or what happens when our resource pool is potentially run dry? That's when we start to become a little bit more overwhelmed. And I think, again, we have had to deal with a really, really, really big challenge over the last 20 months. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people's resource pool has been diminished and the ability to replenish our resource pool hasn't been as readily available to us. A lot of the things that we would normally do to help us rest and recover have been taken away. So it is very common at the moment for a lot of people to be experiencing a lot more stress, a lot more worry, and even a little bit more anxiety. And I think this is a great illustration. I actually got this illustration from an illustrator and architect that I follow on Instagram. And when I saw this, I knew I had to take it and put it into my presentations, because it really exemplifies exactly what it is that we have been experiencing. Because as it says in the text there, it has been an incredibly difficult or incredibly tough 20 months. Now, I think the illustrator put this out or published this maybe, I think it was at the start of this year. So it was kind of the winter time, but at the start of the year. So obviously we are now back into winter and it's still applicable. So the cold of winter plus the lack of sunlight plus lockdown plus the uncertain future plus the whole of the past year, generally plus the unrelenting news, and so on and so forth. So all of these things we have had to take the burden on top of our usual stresses and our usual challenges. So the things that we would normally be potentially faced with on a daily basis. So the things like money problems, so things like relationship issues, or maybe even just having a lack of time. And then you add COVID and, like I said, the previous lockdowns, the uncertainty in the future. That is all going to be a lot to carry, and it can become very overwhelming. And we even look at that one, the uncertainty around the future. There was a lot of hope that kind of led us up to the 22nd of October. And now, obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on in the news that makes us a little bit more anxious about what's going to happen this winter. So if you're feeling a lot more tired, if you're feeling less creative, if you're feeling that you don't necessarily have that get up and go, the usual get up and go that you usually have, or the get up and go that you had that helps you initiate or come up with the plan for your own business, then I would say do not be surprised, because it is something that is very common that a lot of people have been experiencing because of the tough 20 months, because of that challenging 20 months that we have been through. And unfortunately, I say 20 months, but it looks like it could be going on for a little bit longer. So how do we deal with this? What are the things that we can do? Because it is a very normal thing. This is how COVID has been impacting us. This is how the last 20 months has been impacting us, making us feel a lot more lethargic, making us feel a lot more tired, making us feel a lot less creative, even helping us in a weird way to make more micro mistakes. And that's what I would call them, is these little micro mistakes of maybe not sending an email on time, not contacting the person you were supposed to be contacting, putting something on your mental to-do list and not transferring it to an actual to-do list. So a week later, someone asks you, do you have that thing that I asked you for? And all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, I completely forgot about that. That has been happening in every business around the country, probably lots of businesses around the world. People are making those micro mistakes because it has been so tough over the last couple of months, or last 20 months, not even a couple of months. So what can we do? How can we manage this? The most important thing you can do is look at it from the point of view of control the controllables. And if anyone here has ever had an interest or participated in any kind of sport, that is something that they tell you all the time. And that is a message that we give to our elite rugby player members all the time. Control the controllables. There are only so many things that you can actually do. There are only so many things that you can actually have an influence on. And this was a message that was taught to me when I was actually playing. I actually played Leinster under 21 rugby. And I'll never forget, we were going through some backline moves and we were learning how to run the ball and to execute certain plays. And the coach kind of made us stop at one point and said, it's great that you are learning how to do this, but what is one thing that you won't be able to have an influence on? Even though you can play this this can be as practice as possible, this can be perfectly done on the training pitch. The one thing that we don't have control on is what the opposition is going to do to us. We don't necessarily have control on what is going to happen external to us. All we can do is focus on trying to execute things as well as possible, not even to perfection, but just to the best of our ability. And once you take control of that, then there's no point in worrying about the opposition because you can't actually influence them. And that's what this next kind of diagram shows. And you'll be very, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the word now. You'll be very grateful to hear, that's what I'm saying, that you guys are the first ones to actually get to see this diagram, because I keep referring to it in my presentations and I keep forgetting to put it in until now. So you guys are the lucky ones. You get to see this. And you may have seen it somewhere before, but I think this illustration basically, it exemplifies or reiterates the point of control the controllables. So I love this diagram. I love this flow chart. So you can see it here. Do you have a problem in your life, or are you worried about something? If you say yes, then the question is, can you do something about it? And either way, whatever your answer is, can you do something about it? Then the answer to that is then why worry? And the whole point is that if you can do something about it, if there is something that you can personally action to put in place to make sure that you can react in an appropriate way, then that is what you should do. Then that is how you can stop worrying about it. If you can't do anything about it, if there is nothing that you can influence about the situation, then the best approach in that situation is to not worry about it. Now, I know that that is far easier said than done. And I can sit here and wax lyrical about how it's very easy to just brush things off, but we know that that's not true. But it is the idea that if you can do something, if you figure out what that is, then the best course of action is to actually action that point. If you can't do anything about it, then the best thing that you can do is be as kind to yourself as possible and try not to worry about it. Another thing that you can do, and this was again given to me in a sporting situation, is live to this analogy. And that is, when the coals are lit, barbecue the steak. And what that means is that if you have the energy or if you have the ability to do something, that's when you can do it. So if you know that there is an action point and you have the capacity to follow through on that action point, then that's what you can do. If there is an action point and there is not enough fire within you, or there is not enough energy, or you've given a lot of people a lot of other things, then there is no point in forcing it. And we use the barbecue analogy because I'll actually tell you the situation when I was told, when I first heard this. And that was, I used to do another sport. So I played rugby first, and then I got an injury. So I transitioned into another sport, maybe 10 years later. So it was a very long transition. But I transitioned to another sport, and that sport was Olympic weightlifting. And for anyone who's not familiar with Olympic weightlifting, you literally pick something up that's very heavy and put it back down again. So I remember going into a coaching session, and life was happening, and I was just very tired that day. And I went in, and my coach had written out the session that I was supposed to do, and he had written out the weights and the numbers of the lifts that I was supposed to hit. And I just said to him, I really don't think I can do that today. And he said, well, when the coals are lit, that's when you should barbecue the steak. And to be honest, I was very confused, and I didn't know what he was talking about. And I thought, are we having a barbecue? Can I have my steak medium rare, please? But what he actually meant was that if you don't have the energy to do it, don't force it. Anyone here who's used a barbecue before, or who has seen someone else barbecue, they will know. And if you think back to the summer and those lovely summer days that we've had when barbecues were sold out in 2020 in Ireland, you will know that the coals have to be at a certain temperature. They have to be at that white hot temperature in order to cook the food properly. If you put the steak on before the coals are lit to their best, or to that perfect point, will you get a cooked steak? Yes. Will it be the juiciest, nicest steak that it could be? Probably not. If you go past that point of that kind of perfect heat level, can you still cook a steak? Maybe. It'll be a little bit undercooked, or it might not be cooked to the best version of itself. So in this analogy, you are the steak, and the coals are the energy that you have to give to that situation. So even if you recognize that there is something you can do about the thing that you're worrying about, do not force it if it's not going to happen, if it's not going to result in the best version or the best outcome that you are looking for. And that can be quite hard to do, to be able to assess the situation and not try and force yourself to do something. And that's why you also have to be such a kind person to yourself. When it comes to considering your energy levels, when it comes to considering what action points you can take, You have to be kind to yourself. Mistakes are going to happen. You are not going to be able to do everything perfectly. And there are going to be times when you just don't have the energy to do it. And I'm not saying that you can brush it off and you can never have to worry about it again, but it might be a case of giving yourself that little break to kind of mentally say, look, I'm very tired. If I try to approach the situation now, it's not going to solve it. It's actually potentially even going to make it worse, or I'm not going to be able to give my best version, the best version of myself to that situation. So I'm going to take a step back and let myself rest and recover so that I can be the best version of myself in that situation. This also applies to even in terms of how much work you do, how much time you spend at work. There are only so many hours in the day. And remember that we are carrying a huge burden of COVID, of that uncertainty, and we've been carrying it for 20 months. Usually when we are faced with a threat or we are faced with some level of challenge, we have an increase in cortisol, an increase in adrenaline. And if you remember from secondary school biology, that's because it is the fight or flight syndrome that has kind of increased those hormones within us, because we are either supposed to fight that saber-toothed tiger or run away from that saber-toothed tiger. Now, luckily, we don't have saber-toothed tigers, but we have had COVID. And that spike in adrenaline, that spike in cortisol has, instead of being short-lived to give us that increase of energy to either fight it or run away, it has been here and we have been living with it for the last 20 months. So if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling a little bit more lethargic, be kind to yourself and allow yourself to say, it has been a tough 20 months. I'm allowed to want to take it a little bit easier. I'm allowed to want to get those coals up to the perfect temperature before I force myself to do something. So I just noticed it is 1:40 now, so I'm going to wrap it up there. And I know I've given you just a really small bite-sized little pieces of information about mental health and well-being. I hope you can understand and appreciate that you have been through a tough 20 months and it's okay to feel like it's been a tough 20 months. And I also want you to now think about how you can be kind to yourself. And I want you to come up with a game plan, because this is an outline of a rugby pitch. The Irish men's team are facing the All Blacks this weekend. We know for a fact that they are not going to step out onto that pitch having no idea what they're going to do. They're not going to step out onto that pitch kind of going, so what's next? They're going to have a plan in place. And that is the best approach when it comes to your mental health and well-being. Have a plan in place. Someone put in here that they do Olympic weightlifting, which is great. And it's such a powerful mental health resource for you. So what is your version of what is your version of Olympic weightlifting that you can do to help you refresh, recover? And it doesn't have to be something physical. It can be something like relaxing or reading a book or watching your favorite movie. So if you do have any questions, do please put them in. I will happily answer them a little bit later. I'm not going to keep you for any longer. What I'm going to do, give you is some take-home messages now. Mental health is universal. It has been incredibly tough year plus for all of us. When it comes to your stress and worry, do think about it in terms of control the controllables, and 100% get a game plan on how you can be kind to yourself. So that was a really quick session. If there is anything that you feel has maybe made you think about how you want to focus on your mental health a little bit more, or if there's something a little bit more serious going on for you, I would definitely encourage you to visit your GP and seek a mental health specialist or referral to a mental health specialist. If you ever want to talk to someone, you can actually text hello to 50808 and you can start a conversation anytime, day or night, with a trained counsellor. And you can get all of this information and other ways to access mental health services and to be proactive with your mental health and well-being through the Tackle Your Feelings website. And even if you download the Tackle Your Feelings app, all the information is there on the Get Health page. If you haven't already, and if you're on Instagram, please follow us at TYF. We have loads of little pockets of information, little tips and tricks and words and messages from our ambassadors, and sometimes we even run competitions. And then finally, do download our absolutely free app. Everything I spoke about today and everything I'll speak about next week will also be on that app in a lot more detail. So it's free to download on both Android and Apple. So I will leave it there for you this afternoon. I want to say thank you again for dialing in. And if you're watching it back, thank you for watching it back. If there are any, the session next week is on Tuesday at the same time. So 1:10 until 2. And I'm going to be talking about resilience and optimism. Yeah, I kind of picked that up from your, so I'm going to be talking more specifically about, oh, sorry, just realized, I closed my apologies. I closed the window with my video. Didn't know where I went there. I'm going to be talking to you more about specifically some of the resources that you can put in place to help you deal with the challenges that we're facing. So I hope that you dial in again next week. So thank you very much, guys, and I hope you have a lovely Wednesday and a lovely rest of the week. And good luck to the Irish team. Both the men and women's teams are both playing this weekend. So hopefully we'll have some good news to share next week. So thank you very much.